Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Evan Scrimshaw. On today's podcast, we're going to be reviewing the debates. We're recording this late on Thursday night, early on Friday morning. I had to break out a guest that I've been wanting to have on for a while. It's as good a time as any to do it. Pavan Sodhan, former staffer in the BC government, BC NDP, and is just launching a consultancy strategy firm. One of the sharpest guys I know, has significant ties into ethnic minority, South Asian communities, which will be super valuable given the all the conversations about Brampton and Surrey and Mississauga that we have had and are going to continue to have in this election campaign. One of my best friends, very, very, very good friend of mine, Pavan. Thanks so much for doing this.
Evan, it's great to be here. I know you mentioned it earlier. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad that we get to spend a little bit of time talking about what's going on in the campaign with, 10 days to go?
I believe Friday will be 10 days, I think, because I think that will be day 3027. There's a reason I do the day number counter when I update my model every day on Twitter. And it's mostly so that I can comfort myself with the fact that this campaign is actually going to end sometime soon. Before we start talking about the debates, before we talk about the polls, before we talk about the state of the campaigns in general, and then we do I'm trying to come up with like a fancy name for basically, I ask a lot of dumb white questions about Brampton and Surrey and etc. You make your soft launch, do your thing for your new consultancy, buddy.
Awesome. I know this is my only choice for launching this. I'm very glad that I get to do it on your platform, Evan. So yeah, I born in Toronto but raised in BC. I have significant ties to both of those provinces, and funnily enough, also Calgary. I did my master's out there. Spent the past almost 4 years working in Victoria for the government, and learned a lot, experienced a lot, and I'm excited about launching Sodhan Strategies.
Okay, I have this is not where I was intending on going with this, and we'll talk plenty about your BC experience as it relates to what you learned in the provincial election last year, what happened in BC last year, et cetera, et cetera. But have you ever met Tom Flanagan?
Absolutely. I took a whole 4-month course with him.
Okay. Is he as like, I am obsessed with Tom Flanagan. I don't think there is a Canadian figure that I find more fascinating than him, mostly because he's like very clearly one of the forefathers of like this generation of conservatism. And yet he's also kind of batshit. So I just don't understand how somebody who managed to be as influential in the Reform Party and the firewall letter and all of that stuff was also stupid enough to say some of the things that he has said about, Indigenous and First Nations people. And, of course, the famous like child porn comments that got him like quote unquote canceled, a decade ago now. So please tell me, is Tom Flanagan actually a genius, or is he an idiot?
I would say, first of all, I took his class in 2018, so he had, not been in the government for a while. This is 10 years after the 2008 election, 7 years after the 2011 majority with Harper, right? So he hadn't been involved, in my understanding, with 2015, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm very grateful I took that course with him, right? It was during my master's degree, and, I learned a lot from him and that class, but also, we recognize in that class, like his Wikipedia page was very long, right? And we were all very aware of it as a cohort. I'm laughing because it's true, right?
No,
And
that's just fucking hilarious to me. Flanagan is just like my, like, if I could get somebody like 90 minutes, the true serum from Harry Potter is real, and I just could ask, anybody. I think I think Tom Flanagan would be shockingly high on my list of people I would want 90 minutes, 90 minutes in a room with on true serum with.
here's what I'll say is he was very generous with his time to the students of that class. He would make time before and after to answer any questions, obviously, so that the information was dated, right? He wasn't up on a lot of the newer trends regarding technology, which is fine. That happens. He's a dinosaur, but the mind and the strategy of campaigning, especially in Alberta, that was very valuable, and I'm glad that a lot of that has stuck with me, right?
Yeah, no,
Especially related to winning, right? Like that's what I'm all about, right? Yes, it's important to have values, of course, and be true to who you are, but winning is the number one thing when it comes to campaigns, right?
Yeah, so you were saying earlier that you caught about the first hour of the debate. I somewhat quasi insanely live blog the entire 2 hours. I think so in terms of like things that you missed like a pretty bad security clearance answer, which, I think a lot of conservatives are going to be clipping that one at the end, from the end of the debate. But in terms of what you saw, what was the most significant moment of the debate? What was the biggest sort of takeaway for you from the debate? And from the hour that you saw, who did you think won?
So yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't catch the whole thing, but the first roughly 60 minutes, I was with one of the ministers and his family watching it, and obviously it was a liberal watch party, but I thought that what we saw in the first 60 minutes was what was expected, right? The tariff issue was the number one thing that was brought up, and Carney stuck to his guns. Pierre tried to bring the conversation towards the conservative talking points. Quebec and Blanchette were there, and Jagmeet was trying to get attention. I don't think anything was unusual or unexpected in the first section regarding tariffs and economy. And then the other portion that I was able to really listen to was regarding crime and public safety. And that was, such a big topic, a large topic with multiple talking points, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's guns, borders. But, I thought, again, there wasn't really a whole lot of knockouts or gaffes even, right? At least in the first 60 minutes. What happened in the second 60 minutes, Evan?
It was a lot of sort of same in that I feel like a lot of interactions, again, not the security clearance bit. Polyev definitely won that. It was kind of both people were getting the arguments that they wanted off, right? Like Carney was doing his like sort of quiet, staid, statesman-like thing. Polyev was trying to do his like change stuff. Polyev wasn't that much of a dick, which is, sort of has definitely been the memo that he's gotten this week. So he needs to be a bit softer, probably to try and fix his problems with women. And he did fine, and he got his talking points out, and he did so without being a dick. Like, I think Polyev was the slight winner of the debate. I think without the security clearance moment, I would have said it was a draw. I think the security clearance moment sort of moves it to a, small win for Polyev. But I think both of them got out of the which they want, which is Carney didn't blow up. There are sort of like legendarily stories from his time at the Bank of Canada, that he has a bit of a temper, that he can run, fairly hot at times. None of that showed up. He projected strength. He dealt with some, kind of stupid at many times sort of arguments from other people, and it seemed fine. He seemed, fine with with the situation. It was a lot of what the first hour was, which was, let's take the crime, the crime section, right? The crime, security, safety argument. Polyev does the bail reform stuff, and he gets he gets the clip that he wants, right? He gets the sort of answer that he wants to get out. You're letting, I care about the charter rights of, victims, and you care about the charter rights of, criminals or whatever. And
What
then,
was he saying? Something. Sorry to cut you off. Something that I heard him railing on about is, people in certain neighborhoods of Toronto are terrified of going outside, and they're leaving their keys by the door, which is a real phenomenon. I get that, but bringing that up in a debate, like people already know about that, right?
yeah, yeah, that wasn't, but like, he got what he wanted. He's seen to be raising the issue. He's just seen to be showing that he cares. But Carney gets the good gun answer out, right? Or at least an answer that's going to work pretty damn well for him in a lot of places. That you can't be, tough on crime if you're weak on guns. Like, it felt like a debate where it was a lot of sort of, it codified that it's a 2-horse race. And honestly, by within about 15 minutes, I was just like, hey, can we just trap door out Jagmeet and Blanchette and just like make this a 2-man debate? Because it really, really felt like a massive waste of time every time somebody not named Polyev, Cardi, or Steve Bacon was talking.
Yeah, what I was hearing in that public safety crime, Blanchette was bringing up immigration, and he kept on talking about, Quebec culture, Quebec language, or French language in Quebec. And I get that, but is that really going to resonate in Quebec, Evan? I don't know. You know Quebec better than me. Is that going to move the dial to bring greater support to the bloc compared to, at least from what I'm seeing from your Twitter account, is like the Liberals have consolidated, right?
I mean, so nothing that happened tonight is going to matter because none of his audience is listening, right? Like, last night was the night to do that, which is why it was like really funny that Blanchette like really just tried to speed around a lot of the answers that he was giving last night. And it's like, well, one, these mostly didn't work in French last night. You are a significantly worse English speaker than you are a French speaker. So they are the arguments that barely landed in your first language are landing horribly in your second. The funny thing is that like it's a very, I mean, I've done my block thing a lot, but they are squeezed on, they are being squeezed by Polyev in a way that really does help the Liberals. And it's a very funny thing. And that's why he tried. I mean, that is why he tried to pivot to a more culturally conservative immigration restrictionist, even more so than usual immigration restrictionist position, because he needs to win back culturally conservative voters who are flirting with Pierre Poilievre. Because what you're seeing in a lot of these sort of seats around Montreal places, I don't know Vancouver as well, but like in the same way that people would get offended if you called, Surrey Vancouver, right? So a lot of places that would feel pretty, where people would be offended, faux or real offended at the idea of being Montreal, but are economically dependent on Montreal. A lot of commuters into Montreal. If the bloc got 40 there last time and, 6% of that's go to the bloc, well, suddenly the Liberals become a lot more viable to win if there's a bloc to CBC swing. I don't know what Blanchette's doing. What did you make of Jagmeet? I obviously am not a fan, but I also hate him. So I'm not the world's most unbiased participant in a Jagmeet Singh conversation. What did you make of his performance?
So I am a little bit biased because A, I'm a fellow Sikh Canadian, and B, I know him. I wouldn't say well. I would say like we know each other from working on campaigns and seeing each other around. But it pains me to see some of your commentary, right? And not just yours, like in general, the commentary about his performance as leader, but also his performance in this debate. Because from what I heard and from what I saw a little bit of your running commentary is like, is he being effective? And it seems to me, no, right? In terms of getting off his talking points, which is, that's his job, but the interruptions, the snark, the one word answers, trying to get into especially Polyev's getting on his nerves. Like, is that working? Probably not, right? And maybe it is better that his mic is muted, right?
I mean, I will say the elaborate coughing fits that he kept having right when Pierre Polyev was trying to get his social media clips is greatly appreciated as a liberal. Um, I just don't know how this helps Don Davies win in Vancouver Kingsway or Laurel Collins win in Victoria, or take your pick of NDP incumbent who's currently like somewhere between 8 and 14 points down in my model. Honestly, the debate is giving me less to talk about. David Coleto's polling of English Canada, and remember, English Canada is about 4 or 5 points more conservative than Canada as a whole, just because Quebec is obviously significantly more liberal than the country.
Yeah, I have it in front of me. I see it. Yeah.
So it's what, a 3-point lead on who is more likely to get your vote. Polyev is also more likely to get people to make people not want to vote for him, but you know, 43% of people were more likely to vote for Polyev, 40% were more likely to vote for Carney, 11% for Singh. Perfectly fine result, sort of in line with the idea that Polyev had a slightly better night than Carney, but by no means a fucking landslide, by no means a fucking whatever. People are making, I think, a big deal out of the fact that the people who watched the entirety of the debate were a more Polyev leaning demographic. I'm going to point out again, Carney's worst answer came at about, Carney's worst moment and Polyev's probably best moment came with about 15 minutes left in the debate. So probably more a function of that than anything else.
Before we move on, I just want to give a shout out to David because an essay that he wrote in a book called Political Elites in Canada. This is, I want to say 2019 or 2018. That's one of my foundational scripts. I think the chapter title or the essay was titled Political Strategist. But yeah, David's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's Coleto's fantastic, obviously. 3 times Scrimshire, I guess now. What a wild sentence, man. The fact that David Coleto has been on my podcast 3 times, I'm honored to. Sometimes I remember the things that I have happened to me, because of people giving a shit what I have to say, and I don't know what to do with that information sometimes. I sometimes mentally melt down for a minute because it's like, oh yeah, David Coleto will come on my podcast. I've asked him 3 times and he has come on 3 times. It's remarkable. So you don't sound very surprised by the fact that the polls didn't really do anything, or at the very least that Coleto's polling backs up the idea that sort of both Carney and Polyev had a pretty good day.
I think it's still just representative of the fact that debates don't really change people's minds, right?
Well, they don't change people's mind unless somebody royally shits the bed, right? Rustad had a very bad debate in BC, and that sort of took the air out of the BC conservative balloon. And obviously Joe Biden, welcome, come on down. But Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton 3 times, Joe Biden twice in 2020, winning the debate and winning is not exactly a super predictive thing, certainly not in America. I don't know. Has anybody ever thought that Doug Ford had a super amazing debate performance? I don't know. People pretend he had a great performance in 2018. It wasn't that. It was that Horvath had an absolutely horrible one. But yeah, no, I don't think the debate, the reason the debates matter, right, is that if you're trying to sort of tell the story of this election, right, and you were looking at it last week. I wrote this in a piece sort of just shitting on Daryl Bricker, CEO of Ipsos and author. Have you read The Big Shift, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, my first job out of college was working at the Ipsos office in Vancouver.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, Big Shift is so bad. It's funny. I've told the story to people before, but I've read it twice. I read it once in high school, and I was like, "Oh my God, what a theory!" This seems really great. Oh, he's so smart. And then, of course, Trudeau wins the election. I read it again as a university student in the Trudeau majority years, and I'm like, wow, this is one of the stupidest fucking books I've ever read. Um, but I made the point that there were basically like three set piece events this week, right? Uh, the Polyev Carney Tulamanda Parl last Sunday, and then the two debates. And if you want to sort of make the case that the Liberals were going to do badly, they would have to, like, those three set piece events were going to have to go badly for them. And they haven't. So we have 10, we have 11 days still in this campaign. 10 full campaigning days, I think, plus then election day. The Conservatives are losing. They're losing badly. It's still a 9-10 point race in Ontario. Yes, the polls have tightened a little bit, but not really. If you were advising Pierre Poilievre, what would you say? And given that the debates weren't the knockout punch that you needed them to be, where do you go from here?
Well, first of all, I would say that I wouldn't want to be advising Pierre Poilievre, right? Like that's a good position to be in right now. Jen Byrne, I hope that you're able to do something to change your fortunes on a personal level, right? Not on a political level, just on a personal level, because it's not a good look to have a 25-point lead for, what was it, 18 months, Evan? How long was that lead consistent for?
Yeah, about 18 months. Yeah. No, it was growing and growing and growing and growing for about 12, and then it stayed consistent around 20 for about 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's disappeared in what, 100 days, 120 days, something like that. And yeah, to answer your question though, number one is I wouldn't want to be in that position. But secondly, I would say is like obviously the messaging and the strategy needs to change, right? Circumstances have fundamentally transformed with Trump being the president of America. And we're seeing some of that change in the language from Pierre, but when you prime your base and other Canadians as well with social media ads, with language, with rhetoric of Trudeau being bad for the country, you can't just change it on a dime now that Trudeau's not there anymore, right? And when you tell your supporters and Canadians as a whole that we support the Trump movement and now the Trump movement is coming against Canada, of course people are going to remember that. So how I would tell Pierre to change is just like, yeah, you got to recognize that your messaging has worked when Trudeau was there and it's not working anymore. You got to change it up. I don't want to get into how I would change it, right? You would have to hire me and pay me for that, right?
Okay, but in fairness, let's be very clear. Jenny Bird is not listening to this podcast, so come on, give me at least a tease to what
Yeah, of course not. You shouldn't be. You should.
you would do.
So here's what I'll say is what I know is the Punjabi and South Asian community in Canada, right? And for the past 3 elections in Brampton and in the ridings of British Columbia and a few of Alberta ones, it's pretty much gone Liberal and it hasn't been close, other than Tim Uppal and Jasraj Holland in Edmonton. So what I know is the messaging when Trudeau was in power over the past, 2 years, it seemed that the community was ready to flip to conservative. And the messaging that I was hearing is like, hey, like we gave them a chance, 10 years, we elected them multiple times, these MPs, and some of them were high profile ministers, right? Navdeep Bains, Harjit Sajjan, Amarjit Sohi as well, right? But now the Liberals are very excited about Carney being in the seat running against Pierre. The community is, it seems to me at least, what I'm seeing on the ground, what I'm hearing from my sources is the lead that they won with, which is multiple thousands in those Brampton seats, multiple thousands in the Surrey seats. Before it was supposed to be closer, I don't think it's going to be close anymore. I think it's that margin of victory is probably going to stay the same.
A good transition to what I was gonna, the other reason I wanted to have you on the podcast, other than just to have you on because you're smart. There's been a lot of discourse about the 2024 BC election and the sort of racial depolarization that we saw partially in the U.S., but also in Surrey in 2024. David Eby obviously struggled with, did significantly better in wider parts of Vancouver than in more ethnically diverse parts of south of Fraser. What are the sort of like lessons to you started to touch on it, but I really want to dig into your BC experience. Obviously, you were there for the Horgan Eby majority years. You saw that election up close. Like, what? How? Okay, I guess here's the way I want to frame it. How much of the bad progressive performance in BC with Punjabi voters in specific, but sort of with non-white voters in general, how much of it was David Eby specific factors, drug legalization going pretty fucking badly, I think we can admit. Some of the SOGI education policies, the nonsense about taking letter grades away in schools, and how much of it do you think is a sort of general discontent with sort of broad progressive politics generally? I think I know the answer to the second part of that, but you were there for BC, you saw it certainly when you were talking to me privately, and I think you tweeted a long thread of it. You weren't caught off guard by that movement in BC. So what did you learn in BC, and what lessons do you draw that are actually applicable to this campaign as opposed to what was sort of David Eby specific?
So the second part of your question, I think I'll address first, which is the BC NDP were in power for 7 years when that election happened, right? So there was the whole incumbency factor, which is going to happen, obviously, right? Like that's a very obvious thing to point out, that whoever is in power for 2 terms, people are going to be unhappy, right? But to bring up the specific factors in the multicultural communities, right? In Richmond, the major one that was hammered home by the opposition again and again in the legislature, in the media, in the WhatsApp groups, in the conversations that people were having, was regarding decriminalization and crime in the community, right? That was major all over the province, but that was specific to Richmond, but also, in general, in the multicultural communities south of the river too, in Surrey and in Langley. But the other factor that you brought up was SOGI and the anti-SOGI movement amongst the conservatives. Like the amount of content that is pumped out is objectively impressive by the opposition, whether it's formal, right? Formal content, or informal by just idiot bloggers and, people trying to be famous on social media, but they happen to have 50,000 followers, right? But they're also wrong. Like a lot of what they were posting was wrong, but voters don't care about wrong. They care about what's in front of their eyes, right? So yes, it wasn't a surprise to me because it works, right? Like that kind of messaging works when you're putting that amount of content, whether it's video, images, long paragraphs of just copy and pasted onto WhatsApp groups and Facebook messaging groups of like 100 plus people, right? Like if you keep on doing it, it's gonna register in people's minds, right? So yes, it wasn't a surprise to me that the BC NDP struggled. But also, it wasn't a surprise to me that they were able to hang on to a number of seats, right? The BC MLAs that won, even if it was by the skin of their teeth, they are popular because they're in the community and they do the work. And I saw that firsthand, right? Regardless of the messaging and the overall campaign, is on an individual level, the constituents knew they were, and they voted for them enough to let them win. And on a leadership level, more of the people that I saw and I talked to, and my impressions was, especially after the debate that you brought up, was, yeah, David Eby was more leader-like compared to the opposition. And those were the two major factors, was the individual MLAs who were popular, but also, yeah, more people liked David Eby compared to John Rustad.
I don't know if this is like I don't know if this is like a terribly offensive thing to say. It feels like white people care about incumbency way less than minority communities do. Which I think that says a lot about sort of a lot of the predictions of liberal doom with, in Surrey and Brampton and Mississauga. I feel like good incumbents are worth more in those seats. And I mean, that was pretty much the story of the BC election. Like the swings in or south of the Fraser, the swings were pretty uneven, right? Which says a lot about the quality of the incumbents that were, the ones that held on tended to do significantly better than the ones that didn't.
Yeah, there was a very real. Just to quickly point out that there was a very real personal factor to the fact of who won and who didn't. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I know everybody involved.
Yeah, I won't make you spill state secrets on why the people who lost. So in terms of the BC seats, right, you've got obviously the Richmond seats that the Liberals gained last time, in part because Aaron O'Toole went far too, I'm not going to say far too hard on China, because I actually quite agree with a lot of that personally. But you've got the Richmond seats that were more heavily Chinese that didn't go well for O'Toole last time. You've got the Surrey seats, which have been sort of liberal. The Liberals want to try and win back South Surrey White Rock, which they held at a by-election, and I want to say they gained at a by-election during the majority parliament and haven't been able to hold since.
So that's
how are we thinking the Liberals are going to do? How do we think the Liberals are going to do in those sponsored seats? Sort of frenemy of the pod, Brian Burkett, has talked about, maybe the Conservatives could gain Surrey Centre. Do you think that's in the cards, or do you think that's sort of ambitious conservatism talking?
I wanted to quickly point out the South Surrey White Rock riding, which was, we picked it up in the by-election of 2017, I want to say. It was just a straight up personal factor of Gordie Hogue, who is one of the most popular people I've ever seen on a campaign trail. And he, by his own willpower, got that seat in 2017, held that seat in 2019, and unfortunately lost it by, I want to say, a few thousand in the latest election. If he ran again, I think he would have won in 10 days. But let's move on to just Surrey as a whole. I know you brought up Surrey Centre, which is MP Randeep Sarai is very popular because he puts in the work, right? And I can pull up the stats, but I don't need to because I just saw it and I was just with him the other day. Is he wins by multiple thousands of votes for the past 3 elections because he's putting in the work on the ground, listening to the constituents, right? It would be very, very surprising if he loses. Like, Conservatives have like 200 plus, in my opinion, right? So
wow, that is confident. I'm not saying you're wrong. This is the area where I am very much distrusting your expertise on this.
I would, just to be clear, like what I'm saying is, like, if he loses, that means like all of Surrey, all of Richmond is going blue Langley, you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah,
entire south of the river is going blue, and it's like a landslide all over the country, right? That's the
which
only
doesn't
way I see that
be on the
happening. And I could
cards
be
right
wrong.
now.
Like maybe I'm not as plugged in as I think I am, right? Maybe the popularity of what I've seen on the ground isn't gonna, materialize at the polls. That's very possible, but I doubt that happens because, his level of support, the margin of victory that he has, I don't see that being overcome, especially with Carney now being such a popular leader, right?
So, can I ask why a lot of Cardi's first endorsers uh it was quite a lot of the sort of Punjabi I don't want to say
And
Punjabi caucus. That sounds like it's like it's more
no, it's
organized.
it's a it's a
It
it's a real
wasn't a
thing.
lot of it was a lot of sort of it was a lot of Punjabi MPs who were originally like the first backers of Carney. Um, like, do we think that was just sort of like smart political tactics, or is there something about Carney that sort of white media is missing in his appeal? Or
So this comes down to, and this is a personal opinion, but I think it's mixed with a little bit of 10 plus years of experience in politics, which is immigrants and the children of immigrants who are very clearly and visibly not white. We came to this country for peace, safety, and better life. And what we want is that in our leadership, somebody who we think can project that kind of stability and security, right? So it seemed to me that the Punjabi MPs wanted that style of leadership after they saw Trump getting into power, right? And that's what they were. It's not only a personal thing. I think that's what they were hearing from their supporters, from the business community of those ridings, right? Is they recognized right away the chaos that Trump was bringing into the system. And I think they recognized that the best way for the party to win overall is to have Carney as a leader because of his reputation, his resume, and just his overall demeanor as well, right?
I mean, in fairness, they were correct. So, like the early Cardi backers were definitely correct about him. I have a there are a few people, Max Fawcett probably first on that list of people that I definitely owe a drink to for my complete lack of Cardi belief. Let's head out to Ontario. There's been some talk. Leger's had some crosstabs that suggest a closer race in the GTA. Um, I've sort of posited that doesn't necessarily mean the Conservatives will win seats. It's just possible that margins in Brampton, they might win some of these Brampton seats by 8 to 10, not 15 to 25 next time. Do you think there's going to be a swing? You correctly posited that like none of the Brampton seats are going to be close when we talked about Ontario. Um,
Oh, in terms of the provincial conservatives sweeping Brampton, yeah, like that
yeah,
was.
yeah. You were in Brampton for a work conference or something, and you were pretty much immediately like, "Oh yeah, no, Ford is going to sweep," and he did, and it wasn't even close. What's your take on Brampton? Obviously, there's a new seat in Brampton, so 6 MPs. Do you think the Liberals can go 6 for 6?
I would be again very surprised if they don't. And I think the question of, oh yeah, the conservatives at the provincial level, they do very well. Why can't the federal ones, right? If you look at, and I'm going to bring it up again, just the overall picture of the Punjabi heavy ridings in the country, there's roughly, 17, 18, 19 of them, 5% of the total that has 25% voters being of Punjabi or South Asian background. And I crunched these numbers recently, but I don't have it in front of me. I should. Basically, we back winners, right? We want to back winners. We want a seat at the table. And what the polling is showing is, yes, polling, I don't want to say polling doesn't drive voters, obviously, but what I've seen over almost 10 years plus being involved in politics, especially with these Punjabi heavy ridings, is like we want to have MPs that are in government. And that's what's shown. All 5 of the Brampton ridings for the past 3 years have voted Liberal and heavily Liberal. Same thing with Surrey. We want to back winners. So if the polling and if the sentiment on the ground, and I'm going to be in Brampton next week, so I'll have a little bit more information for you. If we feel that the winning team is going to be the Liberals, that's one major factor in supporting the Liberals. I don't want to say it's the only thing, like we're not bandwagon jumpers, right? But that is a major factor. Like I definitely have heard that to my face from multiple families, multiple people, multiple business owners, right? Yes, of course, the local candidates matter. And I know that Brampton has great MPs. I know a few of them personally. Like they're not just they didn't just ride Trudeau's coattails and they're not going to ride Carney's. Like they're in the community, they're making calls, they're knocking doors, they're receptive. So obviously that's a major factor. From what I know, they've attempted and they've tried to bring, federal dollars for infrastructure and, the whole gamut of federal policies to the area. And I think it's resonated because they've won 3 elections in a row, all 5 of them.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. The Liberal like West GTA machine is really impressive. I mean, depending on how you
Evan, I need to butt in quickly because I know you said there's 5 ridings in Brampton and now we're adding a 6th one. I got to give a shout out to Ikwinder Gahir, who's the MP for Mississauga Malton, which is right next door. I think he's an up and coming MP.
Oh, well, nice.
And I expect him to hold it because I know that he won in 2021 by 50+%.
Yeah, no, the Mississauga and Brampton margins are just like every time I look at them, I go, how the hell did this happen?
Evan, I want to put at least in the show notes, and maybe we can tweet it out later. Is like I just read this article, I want to say 2 days ago, by this University of Toronto academic, and the title is "Why Are So Many Second Generation South Asian and Chinese Canadians Planning to Vote Conservative?" And she's just doing interviews and she's doing surveys, which I get, and it's showing up that younger people, younger South Asians, my peers, right, people who were born here, yes, the messaging was working. The outreach was working from Polyev, from the Conservative Party, from those TikToks, from Twitter, from all of the content being pushed out, whether it's formal or informal, whether it's on traditional media or social media. Yes, we were trending conservative. I don't know if that's going to actually show up on the ballot box. I'll send you that article. It's pretty interesting. And I
actually read it already, but yes, we will put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And I'm not denigrating her work as the author and as the academic. It's just, I get where she's coming from, and I get where the respondents are coming from who gave their view, and she's correct and they are correct, which is, we want a fairer political future. If I remember correctly, that was one of the main things that people brought up. And with Carney being in power now, I think, I might be wrong, but I think the vast majority of people in the South Asian ridings are still going to continue to vote Liberal, especially the second generation ones.
So let's do some electoral math then. Okay. As of right now, the Liberals are gaining 11 seats in Quebec. They're gaining a handful in Alberta. They're getting a handful in the Atlantic. They're getting 2 in Saskatoon, and they're getting a bunch in BC. But especially a bunch of the NDP seats, Victoria, Vancouver, Kingsway, et cetera, et cetera. So, given that, if the Conservatives are going to win this election, or going to even hold the Liberals to minority government, right? You need to win. You need the Bloc to revive itself, which I'm not going to have you opine on, but it seems unlikely that they're going to get back to where they were. So there will be some Liberal gains there. Atlantic Canada is kind of wonky, but there's room. I don't think the Liberals are really going to get 27, 28 seats, but that's what the polling says. And at some point, we just need to trust the polling. we are where we are. But Ontario is the big one, right? And if the Conservatives can't win, if you don't think the Conservatives are going to win Mississauga Malton, and you don't think they're going to win any of the 6 Brampton seats, well, I'm trying to look for where this is going to happen, and it doesn't look like Scarborough. Like Scarborough has too big of margins for that to really be a place where the Conservatives are going to gain. Maybe they win Markham Unionville, where Paul Chang obviously had to be dropped as a candidate, but they did recruit a pretty good candidate there in his stead. Doesn't look like either the Oakvilles are going to flip. Doesn't look like Adam Vancouverden's in any problem in Milton. And there's a lot of reason to think that Southwestern Ontario might be trending a bit redder in the context of sort of tariff exposure and the fact that Carney is generally deemed to be doing a pretty good job there. If I were a Conservative, I would be shitting myself. Would you agree with me that if the Conservatives can't win in Brampton, and they're not really primed to do very well in Mississauga, would you not agree that it's pretty hard to see how they're coming out of this with government?
You are absolutely 100% correct. It's very hard when you just look at the math and you've crunched the numbers. Every 20 minutes you're doing this, Evan, right? You're looking at the numbers, you're changing it around.
Every single time a new poll is released, I'm putting it in my model and checking it and updating it privately, and then I'm releasing it every day. But yeah, no, every single time a new poll drops, I instantly, put it in the model.
Yeah, so, for the numbers countrywide, I'm relying on you for the ridings that I know, which is, like I said, 15 to 20 of them. Ontario, a few in Alberta, and then the ones in BC. The BC ones are easier because I'm on the ground, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm seeing the campaigns, I'm going to the offices, I know half the candidates personally, right? And let's bring up, I think, what is the most likely out of all of them of a flip would be Delta, right? We have the minister, Carla Qualtrough, not running again. We have a very strong Conservative candidate, a local police officer, local social media star who's been campaigning for 18 months, young Punjabi guy who's very popular, who's spending a good amount of money on his campaign. And from what I saw, the local Liberal candidate was only appointed, basically a month ago. That's the most likely, right? But think of the confluence of factors for that, right? Incumbent minister, very popular, who's won by a lot every time for the past 3 years, is not running again. Very, very strong personal local candidate for the Conservative. NDP candidate that I have no idea about. And there's no Greens or PPC, right? So it's a straight up two-way race. If the Conservatives are going to pull it off in the Lower Mainland, in terms of flipping a seat, that would be the most likely that I would say, right? But then that gets counteracted with what's going on in Abbotsford, South Langley with, I mean, you're aware of that, right? Like Mike de Jong wanting to run and then the federal Conservatives canning him, and now he's running as an independent, and you never know, a Liberal might pull it off because they split the difference between the... What was
the oh God, who was the BC Liberal who got booted in 2020 for was it homophobic comments?
Yeah, that was in Chilliwack. Laurie
same thing. The NDP won with 40% of the vote. That's basically what I'm expecting in Abbotsford right now. But, maybe De Jong is popular enough to straight out win, but who knows?
Yeah, but if he takes away enough, right? Is it possible? I don't know. Let me look at the number because I want to pull that up. But
no, I've got so I have De Jong taking a net 10 points off of the Conservatives. So it doesn't really I'm just having it at 10 points, but whatever. I have a 4-point Liberal lead there, which means that sort of the way I did it is with the BC polling right now and no incumbent, no sort of independent thing, Liberals probably be down about 4-ish, which doesn't seem right, but also the BC polling is really strong for the Liberals in a way that I don't necessarily buy. But if he even takes 10 points the Liberals are ahead. If he takes 20 and the vast majority of that comes out of the Conservatives, bye. They don't have a chance. Whether then it becomes, can De Jong do well enough to get up to the 30s, at which point then he actually might win himself.
That would be such a funny result. You know what I'm saying? And Mike is somebody who I saw regularly, physically in the legislature in Victoria, right? So the fact that he doesn't want to run provincially in the election, what was it, 6 months ago, to run federally, and then at the last minute, they don't let him run because they appoint a 24-year-old, and then both of them end up losing, and the Liberal comes out the middle. Like, you can't see me, but like I'm doing the chef kiss, right?
Oh, would be iconic. Do you have any other do you have any other just like broad election takes? Anything that you've wanted to get off your chest, that this is sort of a good opportunity to
there's something I've been mulling recently, right? And because I go back and forth with this on a personal level, but also what I'm reading from supposed experts, right? Which is, and Evan, I want to get your take on this, right? The three major factors of why do people vote? It's the leader of the party, it's the party platform and the policies and their history, and then it's the local candidate, right? And from what I've always read and from what I've always told and what I've always believed, the vast majority of people vote on the federal leader and the federal party, and the local candidate is marginal, right? Unless it's a superstar candidate, right? And the perfect example is George Chahal flipping a seat in 2021 in Calgary Skyview, right? Who expected that? I did, because I spent some time with George when I was in Calgary, and it was not surprising that on a personal level, he put in the work. And well, he had been putting the work for a long time as a city councillor, but it was not surprising to me to see him win. And you're seeing, pundits and experts being like, oh, how did George pull that off in Calgary of all places, right? And I'm bringing that up to talk about the recruitment of candidates by the Conservatives, right? They would be in a much better place if they had stronger candidates, right? Like, yes, the party overall might be down because of Trump shenanigans, right? Yes, maybe people view Carney a little bit better than Pierre, or even just, it's tied, which is, better than Trudeau was faring against Pierre. Then it comes down to the local candidate. And from what I've seen from these 20 ridings, we got Tim and Jasraj as incumbents, and they're great. I know them. Jesse in Delta, maybe one in Brampton. But other than that, and this is no offense, this is just like a fact, right? Is I haven't seen the Conservative candidates be in the community, be known, be well regarded in public life, or campaigning or putting their name forward, other than the fact that they joined 30 days ago or 60 days ago or whatever, right? So that's just a thought that I had, which is like, yeah, the Conservatives might be doing much better. It might not even show up in the polls, but I would see it on the ground, right? I would be much more concerned for the Liberals if their opponents were more organized, were more well-known, knew what they were doing a little bit, and surrounded themselves with better staffers, right?
No, I think that's very well said and very interesting. That Polyev has spent a lot of time trying to make the conservative movement less, pale, stale, white men. Jamil Javani obviously being parachuted into Durham. I think the multiple parachutes. The Oxford candidate was also parachuted in over some local objections.
Arpin is from the Peel region, right? And what I'm saying is Jamil, Arpin, even Chevaloy in Calgary, they have some presence and some resume that's, impressive, objectively impressive. You know what I'm saying? And not just on a local level or on a personal level, but also on a party level, right? Like they stand out when they're at the AGM or on social media, right? And I don't know if the candidates in the 17 other South Asian ridings have that kind of pull in the community, right? Let's not even get into the whole gender divide and the polling on the gender divide, right?
Yeah, no, what the world definitely needs is a podcast of two men talking about why Pierre Polly has sex with women. Last thing, do you have a take on Vancouver Kingsway? Obviously, Don Davies, poll denier extraordinaire, and one of my least favorite MPs, mostly because he called me a liberal hack on Twitter. Because he doesn't understand how polling works. Also, I literally voted for your fucking party last time, Don, but good job by you. There's been some takes in the white media that the liberals are running, a paper candidate in Kingsway. Do you have a take?
First, I would say is Don Davies is a machine, right? He's won 15 years now, however many elections that is, if I remember correctly.
8, 11, 15, 19, 21, because he won after Michael Emerson crossed the floor in 2006, and then
Okay, I don't know. I don't know if you have it in front of you. I don't, right? But from what I always figured that seat would be safe as long as he runs, right? And that's been true for the past 3 elections. I'm assuming he won by like significant amounts, right? And it was always going to be conservative versus liberal, like NDP versus liberal, Don Davies versus whoever the liberal candidate was, but it didn't matter who the candidate was because he would win by a ridiculous amount.
He won by 21 last time on the new boundaries.
Geez, yeah. So,
but don't forget the NDP got 29% in BC, and they're getting like 13 now.
Yeah. So from what I've seen, and I was just in the riding, the boundaries have changed a little bit. They've added some of the South Van communities to Kingsway, if I'm remembering correctly. Let me pull that up actually, because I do want to see that. I'm pretty sure it changed. That's what they told me when I talked to the Liberal candidate, which was just a few days ago, right? So they're excited about running. Her name is Amy Gill. I'm happy that she's running because she's on top of it, and she'll give him a run for the money, and maybe there's an upset, but when you win 5 or 6 straight elections and you got the data to back it up in terms of who your supporters are, right? Like even with the downfall in support, what did you say, 15 points provincially?
Yeah, it's about 15, 16 point decline, liberal vote up, similar amounts. Like it's, there's like a 30 something point swing province wide, and only a 22 point 22 point margin on the new boundaries. Like, any sort of attempt to sort of model this says Don Davies is, fucked.
Yeah, we'll see, right? It's going to come down to the writing changes, which I just brought up, and I'm looking at it now. Yeah, there was a little slice added from Vancouver South, and I think that's Vancouver Granville, I want to say. So that community I know reasonably well. There's a lot of Punjabis that live there, and Amy is a local Punjabi candidate, right? So she should pull some support and donations from them. But I don't want to opine because Don is probably gonna pull it off. He's been a safe seat for a long time, but again, you never know. I think it'll be closer than maybe it's been the last time, right? But that doesn't mean anything if you win by 10,000 and now you only win by 6, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that every time there's a wave, and this is a form of a wave for the NDP, it's a wave departing or not arriving. A lot of people who you didn't think could ever lose suddenly start losing. But one of my favorite pastimes is to watch old international elections when I'm unwinding at night, and the number of times that election night starts and goes, oh no, they're not going to lose. They're so beloved to their constituency. Yeah, they just all lose. My favorite clip of all time is Penny Ashdown saying he'll eat his hat if the 2015 British exit poll is correct, and then well, it was exactly correct, and you know never really ate the cotton that he was supposed to. And any last thoughts? Any last hot take that you want to get out of an election prediction? Anything?
Here's something that I don't want to go down this path, Evan. What if the polls are wrong? What if the 25-point lead that was consistent still there, and for whatever reason, all of these experts, pollsters are just missing it? And these rallies where Pierre is attracting thousands of people, that's the true reality.
Then every single political consultant needs to be fired in every single political party, because if look, I know you're just trying to bait me at this point, and you know what, congrats, you've succeeded. Here's the thing, right? Corey Tonight does not go on David Hurley's podcast every single fucking morning and throw flamethrowers if he doesn't know he's right. But also, look at the sort of like eminently mediocre conservative response that we get to every round of Corey decides to throw a grenade into CPC HQ, right? Vague sources saying we're confident in our position. You know what the Conservatives would do if their internal polling said that they were up 4 in Ontario right now? They'd fucking leak it. Leak it. And they aren't, and they're not, and they're the best they've got is, we think we can win because her rally says. When you've got fucking Ian Brody, no fucking liberal. Ian Brody isn't some fucking bleeding heart liberal, right? Being like, yeah, crowd size is a nice thing to talk about if you don't understand, if you don't understand elections and campaigns. Like, if the conservatives were seeing something different, they would be saying so. It doesn't look like, I'm not claiming I've got a direct line to Mark Carney or to LPC HQ, but nothing I'm hearing, no one in the inner circle or no one sort of, close to the inner circle has said to me, hey, Scrimshaw, you should probably tone it the fuck down, right? No one said that to me yet. And these are people who have told me to tone it the fuck down when I've needed to tone it the fuck down before, which I think says something. And then it's like, the NDP, the fact that the NDP are already at, hey guys, we just need to elect as many new Democrats as possible because, we can't trust Mark Carney with them. Like, the fact that we're already at the Kathleen win, we're conceding that we can't win, just elect as many liberals as possible or now new Democrats as possible for Singh, I think says a lot that they're also seeing the same thing. None of these campaigns are acting like the Conservatives still have a lead, right? We can tell from where they're going. The fact that Poilievre, has done a rally in Edmonton, Edmonton people would be offended that I called that Edmonton, but Carney had to go to Oshawa, Poilievre had to go to Oshawa. Carney is spending a lot of time in Windsor in sort of offensive targets. I don't think the subjective stuff, I really don't think the subjective stuff suggests that the polls are wrong. And the thing is, even if the top lines are wrong, it's about a 5 and change lead in the CBC and Eric Arneas poll tracker. I don't keep a national polling average, admittedly, because I don't think it matters. And I don't need it for my model. But we know conservative vote efficiency is what it is, or lack of vote efficiency is what it is, and yeah, I'm really extremely confident the Liberals are going to win this election. Like, I don't really want to be, because if they lose, I'm going to look like a fucking asshole and I'm going to look like a fucking moron. But I wouldn't be this confident if I could find a path, and I can't find one. So,
here's another way to phrase that question, because the way that I asked it the first time, which was, targeting specifically the polling, right? Let's move on to another way to talk about that, which is, and it's something you brought up earlier, and we've talked about a little bit, which is provincial conservatives being successful. That means that those ridings are now going to vote federal conservatives. I hear that a lot from people who don't know better, like, just amateurs, which is fine, like whatever, good for them. But you also hear it from people who should know better or you think would know better. And then you realize, like, no, they are dumb, like political strategists and pundits and whatever kind of title they give themselves. Like, no, they are dumb as well. Like they cannot believe that voters are smart, that voters recognize the difference between provincial and federal.
Doug Ford. Doug Ford just, Doug Ford. How could Doug Ford have, basically swept the West GTA after Justin Trudeau just won it? Or how could then Justin Trudeau have then reswept the West GTA 2 times after Doug Ford won it? Right? Like, come on now. Come on. It's so fucking ludicrous.
Yeah, and I said this before, just 30 seconds ago. I would really want to reiterate it, which is, if a Twitter person or social media person or Facebook or whatever is saying that and they're banking on it, like, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to bank on it and believe it. Like, that's fine. You can do that because you don't know any better and you're kind of on the bandwagon of conservatives being successful provincially, and that's going to translate into federal conservative success. But to see, like, people with the title of vice president of a national PR company who works for the conservatives, it's just like, come on, like, are you serious?
Yeah,
I'm not going to name names again, but we both have seen a lot of people losing their minds because they felt they were going to win and it was going to be easy and it was going to be handled and it wouldn't even be close, and now they are so discombobulated that they are the dumb ones are losing their minds, and the smart ones, they don't know how to pivot.
The other thing is, I'm just really sick of people doing like, oh, but we got a great response on the doors. Yeah, with 10 days out, you're not hitting every door. You already should have your IDs, and you're just trying to yeah, you're trying to activate your own voters at this point. You're not just knocking every door in every door in a subdivision like that. We're done that now. So yeah, you should be getting it. These are the people that you're hitting should be the whose doors you're hitting, not any sort of like actual physical, attacks. But the doors that you're hitting should be already ID'd as doors that you like either from previous elections or from allegedly the conservatives have been ready for this election for 8 fucking months or whatever. It's just, I don't know, man. This has been a great podcast, though. I do know that you're great. See if I can remember how to get your name properly.
No. Let's make sure we do this. Yeah. I'm all ears. Go ahead.
Pavan Sodhan.
There you go.
Thank you for doing the Scrimshaw Show. Sodhan Strategies. What's your Twitter?
It's at PSODHAN.
Nice. Anything? Am I allowed to? Am I allowed to? Are we allowed to? Am I allowed to talk about the thing that I want to talk about right now?
I don't remember what that was.
Your other form of audio.
Oh yeah.
Communication. You have a book podcast launch.
I do.
Have it launched yet?
It should be launched by the time your listeners are going to be hearing this in their AirPods or speakers or however they're listening to this. Yeah, I'm very excited about reviewing books and getting the authors to spend some time with me. I got 3 up on all the platforms already, and I'm looking to get at least 1 a week, hopefully more than that. But yeah, it's exciting that I'm getting a lot of prominent people who have written some pretty relevant books on topics that are, timely: climate change, world trade, politics.
Didn't you have Stephen Barr on to talk about his biography?
I did. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. And, yeah, it's the world that we live in. Hey, Evan, is we need smart people, and we need smart people to convince other people to read more, right? And I know social media is great and all, but the only, in my opinion, the only way to absorb stuff is to sit down, put your phone away, and get through 250 pages of relevant content, right?
So you still haven't promoted the name of the podcast, which
Oh yeah,
is
it's
very
it's
that
it,
SEO.
yeah, it's Books in Five. We'll link it, and I hope I get some more followers out of this, and I also hope to improve on my interviewing because I'm just starting out, and I'll get better over time too, right?
Yeah. Have you read the new Mark Burry not Carney biography,
No, no,
Valiant biography yet?
The Ripper. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
So I'm mostly the way through it. I got an advanced copy from Mark. I'm very grateful to him. I'm hoping to have a review up on the site next week. The problem is it's really good. And I know that sounds oxymoronic to say it's a problem that it's really good, but the problem is it's really good. And so I actually like want to sit with it and like really take it in, and I'm like rereading pages and like making sure I'm like, absorbing it all. As opposed to just like kind of skimming it, which is what I do with a lot of political books that are very good. um but no, it's very, very good. I just wanted to give that a shout while we're talking political books. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Blue Sky the same. Political writing, scrimshaw.substack.com. I'm doing some F1 writing over at formulawhatever.net. Mostly because I need an outlet to talk about F1 because, oh boy, I am going to go crazy with this campaign and the post campaign if I don't have an outlet to write about sports. I will be writing an NHL preview I'm just going to dump it on Skirmish Unscripted because, frankly, I used to write those for the lines, and now I don't work for the lines anymore. In fairness, basically nobody works for the lines anymore. Rest in piss, Cantina Media. Contenna Media, whatever. But I'm just going to be dumping that on the thing. The Suns have made the playoffs. I'm very, very happy about that. Fuck you to every Leafs fan listening to this. Thank you so much for coming on the show, buddy.
You know what, Evan, before we leave, I got to give you major props because the amount of content and good content and cogent content is very impressive, and it's inspiring. The fact that you're able to put that out day after day, it's not easy. I recognize that, Evan, and shout out to you, man.
I would just like to make clear that I did not ask you to say any of that, but I am very grateful for it. Writing is my outlet. Writing is my sanity. And it's something that, keeps me sane in very, very challenging circumstances. And this campaign is, as anybody who is reading my work will know, is driving me to a fucking wall. So, we are
almost over. Almost over.
I'm so fucking glad. I am indescribably glad that we are
Evan,
only 10-ish days out or whatever.
Which writing are you in?
I got redistricted into Carleton, actually.
Oh, are you gonna go to the victory party or no?
I'm gonna be live blogging election night.
Nice.
My goal is to have like a sort of war room of a few friends. Robert Glasgow, who's on the show a couple weeks ago. No, I can't say his name now. Nathaniel Arfin, obviously. I'm hoping to have those two on a call, maybe a couple American buddies of mine, and just sort of like work through results together while I'm like furiously typing my thoughts. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that I will be able to survive that night. And I'm hopeful that my liver doesn't give out before this election campaign ends because, oh boy, I will be doing a very long cleanse after this campaign.
You deserve it, buddy.
Dry May I'll try and do dry May as much as I can because, it's this campaign is driving me crazy. Thanks, bud.
All right, see ya.
Yeah, so okay, send me the link to your YouTube channel